Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Luton Road podcast, where on tonight's show we're going to be previewing the home game against Luton Town at the Gtech on Saturday. If you haven't already listened to our episode going over defeat at home to Arsenal, go do so now. That episode, as well as our special app with Bees Hall of Famers, Sam Saunders and Marcus Gale, are both live across all of our digital platforms. So please do go and check those out. Feedback's been great on the special episode so far. So thank you for that. Joining me tonight, though, is Phill from the We Are Luton Town podcast. And he's going to be giving us the lowdown on the Hatters ahead of their trip to West London on Saturday. Phill, mate, fresh on the back of a second win this season. How you doing this evening?
Yeah, good. Thank you for having me on, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity to chat to you about the upcoming game. So yeah, thanks for having me. Absolutely buzzing at the minute. If I'm being really honest with you, it's first Premier League win at home in well over 30 years. So yeah, absolutely buzzing at the moment to be a Luton fan.
Nice one, mate. Nice one. We'll get on to the Palace game, but just before we get going, guys, remember, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, please do go and subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels, leave a rating as well, and also give us a follow on our socials. That's at the Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Right, Phill, let's start with the Palace game, since you said it in the intro. What was your initial reaction to the first win at Kenworth Road? How important was it to get that first win at home?
I think it was massive, if I'm being really honest with you. I think you could tell in the stadium how massive it was just to get that monkey off of our back. We got our first win away at Everton in the Premier League, which was our first sort of big hurdle. But for the home faithful to be able to actually see a win in front of their own eyes, we'd come close on a couple of occasions. We had absolute dominance really against Wolves before we conceded to Pedro Neto's individual brilliance, really. We've obviously had a real close call with Liverpool. No one was expecting us to do much against Liverpool, but we obviously went 1-0 up and held on until gone 90 minutes. So to actually finally get it over the line was absolutely massive. The feeling in the stadium was palpable about that sense of relief and that sense of pride that we're in the Premier League. We deserve to be here. We can win games and we can collect points.
You mentioned the couple of games where it's been close. But Palace aside, and this is the kind of question that I ask all of my guests, how would you assess your start to the season? Because I've watched a few Luton games here and there, and even just looking at the results, the winning margins, they're not by much. You've been in almost, well, apart from bar a couple, I mean, Brighton was, I mean, even in the Brighton game, though, I remember watching that on the first day of the season. It's not like you didn't have chances, and the performances have been there, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think, truth be told, it's been a steep learning curve. I think those first two fixtures away at Brighton and away at Chelsea, the scoreline in the first game, like you say, it probably discredited how well we did. Yes, we gave up a lot of possession, but with 10 minutes to go, we got it back to 2-1 through a penalty, and you're thinking, right, let's go and get an unlikely point away from home. But obviously, by doing that, we conceded a couple more goals through an unfortunate individual error. But these things happen. The Chelsea game was more difficult, I would suggest. I think that going away to Stamford Bridge and realising that you're playing against centre midfielders that cost over £100 million, you're going to struggle. It's going to be difficult in this league, you know. But since then, like I say, it was important for us to start getting some games at home. Obviously, we had a couple of we had to rearrange the Burnley game, which was meant to be our first home game. So we've always sort of been on the back foot in terms of how many home games we've played. Up until this weekend just gone, we played 7 away games and only 5 at home. And for us, home advantage is going to be absolutely massive for us this season. Like making Kenworth Road an absolute cauldron is going to be huge. So, like I say, it's been a steep learning curve. We've adapted. We've tried to make sure that we're tight and we're in games, and you can see that, like you said, through the score lines, Mike. We're in games. It's just getting them over the line. That's been the difficult thing. And like I say, if the last couple of results at home are anything to go by, then fingers crossed moving forwards.
I do want to talk a bit about sort of Luton's rise. I know you must be a little bit bored of it as a Luton fan at the moment, because it's like the first not of the rise itself, of actually retelling the rise to everyone that kind of asks. I feel like with me being a Brentford fan, and all the other Brentford fans will tell you, the kind of first thing that someone asks you is, you know, how has it been, this kind of meteoric rise from the lower leagues up to the Premier League? But what has it been like from a fan's perspective?
I think we're riding a crest of a wave. Let's be honest about it. Like this is as peak as I can remember in my living memory. Like I say, I was born in 1987. Our biggest trophy win, I was not old enough to win to remember it. Sorry, in 1988. So that's sort of like our biggest achievement in our history, really. But now it's the second biggest, in my opinion. I think that throughout the 90s and the early noughties, we've sort of gone up and we've gone down, and we've seen promotions, we've seen successive promotions, we've seen relegations, we've seen successive relegations as well. But you do have to pinch yourself sometimes when you're sitting at Kenworth Road and you're thinking, I was there when we were playing against teams like Hyde, we were playing against Gateshead, we were playing against Forest Green before they were sort of the Forest Green as we know it right now. We're playing against Barnet. Like it's been meteoric. Like it's difficult to sort of fathom, and you turn up at the ground nowadays, and yes, it's the same. Don't get me wrong, it's the same, but it's rammed, absolutely rammed all the time. The cameras are everywhere. And there has been significant changes to the stadium that to the sort of untrained eye that doesn't know Luton, you'd be thinking, well, it's still this little in some people's eyes dingy little place that's that can only hold 11,000 now. But to me, it's home. It's my favorite place away from my actual house. I love it, and the fact that it's hosting Premier League teams, it's difficult to fathom, but I'm so proud of them. I'm so proud of our current ownership and how they've led Luton Town over the last sort of 10, 15 years. So yeah, it's just a sense of proudness, really, to be honest with you, over the last 20 years. I think I was going to save it for speaking a little bit later on in the pod, but there are, the targets are to emulate yourselves, and that's not me trying to sort of brown nose up to you as a fellow podcaster, but the reality of it is that you've had a huge rise, and we want to emulate you. We want to be able to be in a new stadium, to be sustainable in the Premier League, and to start pushing for honours. So, like I say, you're sort of 4, 5, 6 years down the road from where we want to be.
You mentioned Kenilworth Road, and I remember when Luton got promoted, and maybe the younger generation of football fans or the football Twitter kids from nowadays didn't quite appreciate the beauty that is Kenilworth Road. Almost said Loftus Road there. Fucking hell!
Don't say that.
Don't say that. Do not say that.
There's a mutual agreement. We will not mention Loftus Road.
Kenilworth Road, and I can speak for all Brentford fans when I say that I'm incredibly jealous of the fact that you managed to refurb Kenilworth Road and have Premier League football there. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the Gtech and we have kind of made it our home, but seeing Griffin Park in a lot of ways similar to Kenilworth Road, very small, very tight, not the largest attendance figures, but it has that kind of old school football ground feeling. And I remember sort of on a Tuesday night, especially in a big game, there's kind of nowhere else better to watch football. And I imagine it's the same with Kenilworth Road. Yeah,
absolutely. Under the lights, Kenilworth Road, as much as I wanted to say it's a fortress at all times, under the lights, Kenilworth Road is something else. It's like I say, it's just a beautiful thing. It's the eye of the beholder, I know that. But like yourself, it's that intimacy, it's that feeling that deep down, you know that the players can hear you. You know that they can hear you on the side. You know that they come out off the pitch and they say that the crowd does make a difference. You know, and like I say, Kenilworth Road has a lot of scars, a lot of nuances to it that you would think, oh, I'm not too sure on that. But I've been fortunate enough to go to every away game so far this season for Luton Town, and I would take Luton's ground ahead of any of them. I would. It's that feeling of going into a bowl. I think that's what I find difficult. So I don't mean to berate them and pick on them, but Brighton's ground, great for what it is, but it is an arena. It's whereas we've got an old school football ground that's sort of tucked in amongst the street. That's why in some of my my write-ups after game, that's why I loved Everton so much. Because Everton's Goodison Park ground was like Kenilworth Road on steroids. It's like 4 times the size, but it's still tucked in between these little streets that are sort of tucked away, you know. So yeah, I'll be sad when we have to leave Kenilworth Road. We do have to. It's a necessity really for us to move forward as a club, but it will be massively sad when we have to lose that. And like I say, hearing fans such as yourself that will come to the away games and experience it, it is an experience. It's one of those things that you will be able to say, I went to Kenworth Road. So yeah, anyone that can get a ticket for our incredibly small allocation, if you can get a ticket, come along and make some noise, because not many people do.
No, I'm very much looking forward to. Even like, it sounds silly, but when the fixture list came out, I singled out Luton Town and Kenworth Road as one of the ones that I want to go to.
Definitely.
Speaking of, there's a lot more bowls in the Championship. Off the top of my head, I can just name sort of Reading Big Bowl, Cardiff Big Bowl. They are just a bit shit, really.
Yeah.
I think there's less in the Premier League, and I feel like in my first season when we were in the Prem, I managed to get to every game bar Chelsea away, every away game, and when we beat them 4-1, by the way, what one to miss. But I felt like that it is pinch yourself territory. There's less bowls, and it's just like, wow, every ground I go to is just, it's amazing. It's such a stark difference between Championship grounds. You mentioned sort of wanting to emulate Brentford, and I do want to talk about the kind of bigger picture with being a fan outside of the top six. What are the long-term targets for clubs like Luton and Brentford? We've spoken about it on our podcast before about how expectations change as seasons go on. Say Luton did stay up this season and you stayed up the next season and you finished higher. What does become the ambition? Because right now, I think there's as big of a gap as there's ever been between that top six / Newcastle in 7th as well. And no signs of slowing down without, 13 other Saudi Arabian investments or something like that.
Yeah, I think that there's a huge chasm. You can see, now that I'm part of it, now that I'm a fan as part of the Premier League fan base, you can see that there's a massive chasm between those top 6, top 7, top 8 even, and ourselves. And I think that if we were fortunate enough to stay up through our hard work and through our sort of squad recruitment, I do think that we will be looking at doing the similar sort of things to yourself, that it will be sort of slowly climbing up those. But you look at yourselves, you look at teams like Palace as well, teams that sort of consistently finish between sort of 10th and 15th place, but ultimately they're a sustainable Premier League side that can start making signings that cost you 30s, your 40s, even 50 million pound. For us, it's very much sustainability for the club. I think to be here is pinch yourself territory in terms of, it feels like we've won the lottery, really, to be honest with you. And I think that that's sort of reflected in our recruitment, because we know in the back of our heads that we've basically just won a free stadium. So sustaining that stadium and being able to then build the sort of the club up from that stadium and being able to re-recruit and make ourselves, like I say, sustainable. Even I wouldn't want to be a yo-yo club. When I say that, I'm talking like your West Broms, your Norwiches that go up and go down, because it's so hard. I mean, you look at Norwich; they're down in the bottom half of the Championship now. Like, it eventually will catch up with you. Staying up, like yourselves, like Palace, will be the ultimate sort of target. And yeah, I think it's one of those things where over the next 5 or 6 years, if we could stay here and just get that stadium up and running, get ourselves set, and start to become a team that people want to come and play for. We're very lucky. We've got a really exciting manager that wants to play football. At the moment, I still think there's a degree of him playing to the strengths of existing players as well. So it's a really interesting time for us to see how that's going to evolve over the next few years.
Just on that relegation sort of sentiment, I mean, there's a lot that's been made about how this season the relegation is as clear-cut as it's ever been, with the 3 teams coming up looking like the ones that are going to go down. I would actually disagree. I think Forest are in big trouble. I think Fulham are in big trouble too, despite their win the other night. But I think Luton, out of those 3 that have come up, they look the most likely to pick up points, and that's starting to show in points now as well as performances too. What do you think about the sort of the 3 teams that have come up? It's the most clear-cut that they're going to go down.
Yeah, I think I for my sins, I listen to TalkSport a lot, and they do they get the bookies on there all the while, which I do have a problem with how much they're sponsored by that. But they're always going on about the odds at the bookies, and it's always that Sheffield United and Luton are sort of nailed on. They always seem to put Burnley above that, which I find interesting, because I feel like there's a bit of a bias because they're managed by Vincent Kompany. It's
Yeah.
as simple as that. But Bournemouth are also down there as well, and obviously I know they've picked up a couple of decent results recently, but the Everton point loss, whether that's temporary, whether that stays or not, is a big source of anxiety for me at the minute, because having another team down there to sort of drag into it can only be a positive. If we can, like I say, pull those people in, like your Bournemouths, like you mentioned, your Fulhams, your Nottingham Forests, then it would hopefully make for a bit of a battle. But what's really pleasing for me is that Luton, because of the name, I think even just saying Luton Town, sometimes there's that stigma attached to Little Luton, and people couldn't believe that the miracle had actually happened, that Luton Town had been promoted to the Premier League after this meteoric rise. But it quickly goes from respect to disrespect. It's very quickly, you're the sort of the pauper, you're the runt of the litter, and people are like, oh yeah, teams like Luton. We've put up with it for years. We've got a hashtag for teams like Luton. We know how to deal with that. But it's that becomes the sort of the narrative that we're doomed from the very, very start. And I think people on Match of the Day, the analysts on Match of the Day, are finally starting to come around that we're more than just a little team that got lucky. Like we're here to fight, and we will fight, and you'll see that in our performances. You see that we don't get battered so far. We do have yourselves, Man City and Arsenal, in the next week or so. So we could be having a different conversation in 2 weeks, but I pray not. But like the point is that like I say, we're showing more class than the other people that have come up, I think, in terms of our performances. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I do want to talk about Luton Players specifically, but I do see so many similarities between Luton and Brentford. Even you just mentioned we used to have a teams like Brentford hashtag. We called little old Brentford all the time. The amount of times I hear Brentford just being swiped aside as this mediocre opposition. I remember listening to a Frank Lampard podcast, and he was like, forget qualifying for the Champions League. We can't even beat Brentford at home. And I was thinking, hang on, Frank, we beat you 4-1 in the first season. We beat you 2-0 in the next season and 2-0 in the next season as well. It's just like they kind of just pass us off. But anyway, I want to talk about some players in particular. One that immediately springs to mind is Chiedozie Ogbene. Honestly, if you'd have told a Brentford fan in 2018 that Ogbene would be playing in the Prem, not only just playing in the Prem, he's been one of your best players. Am I correct?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. He's it's two things for me with Ogbene. He's absolute lightning in a straight line. I mean, I think he's been clocked as the fastest player in the Premier League this season. Second of all, he is really versatile. Plays on both sides, fits into numerous different systems. So if we're playing 4 across the middle, he can go on either wing. He can play as a wing back on either side as well. So he's got himself a goal. He's got a couple of assists as well. So he's had to work to get into the team. But I think as soon as he's actually been given that opportunity to have a go and get some minutes under his belt, he's been undroppable since. And he plays with a smile on his face. He's already a fan favourite. Like, he's got the biggest, most infectious smile, and that goes a long way when he's turning around to the fans and he's geeing them up and he's showing that big smile. So he's loving life, and I'm so thoroughly happy that he's ours, and that we've given him that chance.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely super happy too. When even the short stint that he was at Brentford and he only made a handful of appearances, he was definitely a fan favourite. I remember we were at an away game and he was on the train to the game. He must have been injured at the time with his missus, and a few of my mates had a conversation with him and said he was just a class bloke, just a really nice guy. So I'm a bit gutted that we kind of just didn't see that potential, because I've been watching Luton and in every kind of highlights reel, he's always the guy that's making things happen. I want to talk a little bit about Pelly Ruddock and Panzo. Would I be right in saying that he started in both of the games that you've won this season? Because he played against Palace and he started against Everton as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that, and he's got, for me, sort of one of the best individual stories in football ever. I mean, just incredible, going from the Conference to the Premier League with the same club. Talk to me a little bit about him. What are his strengths? Will he start on Saturday?
Yeah, I think, truth be told, he's been more of a lucky charm. And that's not to discredit him. I think that he is behind Marvelous Nakamba in the pecking order. I think that he picked up a knock on international duty, so he didn't start at the weekend. And the reality of it is that Nakamba, if he's available, he'll play. But that's not to discredit Pelly. He's been getting plenty of minutes as well off the bench. He's usually coming on around the 60-minute mark. He's one of these players where he has an infectious energy. He's the personification of our club over the last 10 years. He's got strength. He's good at spreading the ball wide. He's got that drive as well to be able to sort of get up and down straight through the middle. So I would never want to discredit Pelly. I think that he's an absolutely fantastic player, and he's shown that he can step up at each level. You know, he always makes that jump up. No matter how much people write him off, he will step up. And like I say, it's almost poetic, really, that he's the lucky charm that he happens to start when we win. Caveat it that he wasn't on the pitch when we scored on Saturday, but the point is he was there and he gave us that foundation. So yeah, nothing but love for Pelly. I promise you, nothing but love for Pelly.
Nice. I'm a big fan of Elijah Adebayo. I think that goal against Forest should be up there with goal of the seasons coming in this season. Big fan of the touch and finish. Who else in this Luton team should we be worried about going into Saturday?
I think the main man up top will likely be Carlton Morris to start. He started every game so far. He's got a number of assists, and he has got an eye for a goal. It's just obviously difficult when he's playing on his own up top, and because he drops deep a lot to win the ball, to hold it up, to bring the wingers into play. Sometimes it can sort of bypass him if the build up is a bit quicker. You'll see that some of our best goals have been like through Chong and Ogbene, that have got that natural pace to just absolutely fire up the other end of the field. But that's not to take anything away from Morris. He'll be influential on Saturday. If Adebayo starts, I'd be quite surprised, because he's been so influential off the bench. It's the same with the Forest game. He came on and he just made the world of difference, and that finish was absolutely incredible. I was very close to the front of the stand of that one, and I went absolutely bonkers. it was a lot of relief in that. But
that Forest away end is good fun when you win.
It was good fun. It was good fun. I enjoyed it up there. So yeah, especially the way that we got the 2 goals back, that was particularly pleasing as well. So I think other than that, there's sort of two other main players out on pitch, because Kaminski's had an incredible season, by the way, our goalkeeper. But in terms of our attacking sort of prowess, I think Barkley is the player that stitches everything together. I think as he's getting more minutes under his belt, you're realising just how much of a Premier League sort of clever player he is. His feet are just incredible, and he's got the ability to ping a ball 60 yards to bring someone into play. But equally, he can hold it up, draw players, and then bring players into play a bit more neatly, and a bit. You'll see it if you look back at the highlights for the last goal against Palace, is that he drew 2 or 3 players to him and then played a simple ball out wide, and bang, there you go, we're away. The other player that sort of goes under the radar a little bit, and I am a little bit biased, Mike, so I'm just going to be really honest here. Alfie Doughty, he's another one that sort of goes a little bit under the radar. He plays as a wing back for us. Last week he played as a right wing back, but typically he's on the left hand side, and he's got an incredible left foot. He scored a wonderful
I remember
free
seeing
kick
some stats. Is he's got like some of the best sort of completed crossing stats in the league, or something like that, something along those lines.
Yeah. So amongst our fan base, people are sort of saying, well, Southgate's saying that he's not got a lot of left backs. So I think that's been a little bit premature, perhaps, but that's not to take it away from Doughty. Has incredible pace. He's got a good engine, and he gets up and down and whips the balls in. So he'll be vital if we're going to do something good on Saturday.
If he is to make the England squad, I would be really shocked, because Rico Henry is yet to be called up, and all Brentford fans are massive fans of Rico Henry, and we despise Southgate for not picking him. So if Alfie Doughty get calls up before him, I will be very, very upset. Are you expecting a back 5 or a back 4 against us on Saturday?
Yeah, I think a back 5. I think away from home so far, we've been playing sort of 3 centre backs with the 2 wing backs. Just as I think again, it's a case of trying to stay in the game, to build ourselves a base so that we tend to be better hitting teams on the break, especially away from home. So I think, if I'm honest, I think it's going to be a 5. The last away game we were up at Man United, and like I say, we were narrowly defeated, but it was not a disgraceful performance, not in any way, shape, or form. We, like I say, we built ourselves a foundation, and I think I can't see it being too much different from that. Because with the greatest respect to this will get me absolute pelters, but I've got more fear for playing against you guys than I did against Man United at the time we were playing them, because their form was dreadful. So yeah, I think it will be much the same, and it'll be a 5.
And just before we wrap up, Phill, talk to me a little bit about Rob Edwards, because he seems like a really forward-thinking, progressive manager. He's got a good CV, but also just a really nice bloke, especially from his kind of post-match interviews. He's young, he's fresh, he doesn't kind of give all the PR trained bollocks. He seems like a quite level-headed and nice guy. What have you made of him as Luton manager?
He's been fantastic, because it's one of those situations where our sort of management route over the last few years, it's been, we had Nathan Jones, who like after John Still could have I don't know whether he has got the freedom of the city, but if he hasn't, he should. But he's an absolute legend. I mean, he set us on our way in terms of changing the culture of our club, because it was quite dark and it was quite sour. Teams were coming to us sort of saying, like, shut the crowd up for 20 minutes and then jobs are good and you'll win. He changed all of that. And then Nathan Jones came in and sort of revolutionised the way that we were playing in the lower leagues. We had a brief stint where Graham Jones was our manager, and he was a car crash. That was horrible. He killed a lot. And actually, he was in charge when we came to Griffin Park last. I was kind of hoping to avoid how it last went at Griffin Park, because I was there and it was an absolute nightmare. But yeah, he was the man in charge when you tonked us 7-0. So yeah, we then got Nathan Jones back, and it was difficult because the first time he left us, it was massively sort of backhanded, you know, and there was a lot of ill feeling towards him. But he came back and he proved that he was a great manager for us. And Rob has just taken that foundation on, but I don't know whether or not Nathan would have done what Rob's done. I think his man management is incredible, and that's not to take it away from Nathan Jones. I just think Rob Edwards is an absolutely fantastic man manager, and he's just clever. I think that he's got that that background to be really, really clever and just know what players to use, know to play to their strengths and not try and reinvent the wheel. Like, he knows that Luton have had success from hard work over the last few years. Like, we put in the kilometers, we do the hard work, and we play to our strengths. And the personification of that was the playoffs against Sunderland. We got a lot of stick nationally because obviously it's a rich game, about the way that we played against Sunderland and the fact that we played the high balls and we played to our strengths. If you've got two centre backs that are 5'8" playing against two strikers that are 6'3" and 6'4", then you're going to do that, you know. So Rob knows that, and he's not shy to play to our strengths. And I just think he's been a breath of fresh air. I love him to pieces, and he's going back to the sort of bookies again. He's quite high up on their list to be first sacked. He won't get sacked. Just putting it out there, by the way, he just will not get sacked. Like, we love him too much already. Like I say, there's the move from our neighbours down the road in Hertfordshire, that I won't mention. but yeah, he moved from them to us, and I'd imagine he probably had so much anxiety about how he was going to be treated. But we love him, and he's proven himself, and you can't help but have to love him. Like you say, he's a nice guy, knows his stuff, and we're over the moon with him.
Yeah, I see a lot of similarities between Thomas Frank and Rob Edwards as well. Just in terms of, you mentioned the kind of playing to your strength. Thomas Frank's quite good at knowing the team that he has and knowing the team that he's coming up against, and then kind of setting up his team in a certain way that might not be the best on the eye, but you know is the kind of best way of getting a result, or best chance of getting a result. Final question for me, Phill. One that I ask all my guests, or final couple of questions. What have you made of Brentford so far this season in terms of players, results, and on the back of that, how confident are you heading into Saturday, if at all?
Yeah. So, like I say, I think I've got a bit of PTSD from Griffin Park. So I'm a little bit worried about how it's going to go. But I'm really looking forward to playing you guys. And it'll be interesting to sort of see how you've evolved as a Premier League team as well. I mean, I've followed the Premier League even before we were in it, and I think that there are a couple of players that I think you're a little bit top heavy in terms of your quality. I mean, and that's not to be disrespectful towards the defence, but when I think about Mbermo and Wisa, they're quality players. Like they're top quality players, and like I say, that's without your star man being there. So so I have a lot of respect for Brentford in terms of what they can do going forwards. You've obviously got your linchpin in the middle. You've got Norgard that's there as well, and you've got Pinnock right in the centre of the back line. And I personally really sort of hopeful, because we've not got to play against Rico Henry and we've not got to play against Ivan Toney, because like I say, they've torn us to shreds before. So I'm hopeful that we're playing you at a decent time. I think that, like I say, so far this season, I think that there's probably been a couple of games where you could have snuck a win, but you've drawn a few where potentially you might be a little bit upset about that, rather than taking home 3 points. But as long as you've got Thomas Frank, you're going to be fine ultimately. And I know that you're at that stage now where you're going to be looking towards pushing into the top half, pushing into those sort of those Europa League type places. But ultimately, I think that you're in a decent place. I think that, like I say, it'll be a real difficult Premier League test for us, away day in London. And like I said, I'm over the moon to be going. I'm fortunate enough that I've got a ticket. Really looking forward to seeing how you guys get on, and I think it'll be tight. I'm not sure whether we'll get a win, but I'd take a score draw all day long, if I'm honest with you. That might seem really negative, but like I say, I think that's it's being respectful to our opponent as well. Like I say, you've been up here for a few years now. You've got that nous, you've got those players. So we are still learning. We're doing it as quickly as we can, but being realistic, we need to be respectful of our opposition.
100%, mate. 100%. Looking forward to what should be a good game. I think that'd be a nice place to wrap things up there, Phill. Really appreciate that. The Eden Road podcast will be back next week to obviously go over the Luton game on Saturday and also do a brief look ahead to Brighton in midweek. Just remember, guys, before we leave, please do, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, share it around with your mates. Subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on our socials. That's at the Eden Road on Twitter and at Eden Road Pod on Instagram. Phill, it's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you very much, and good luck on Saturday.
Cheers, Mike. Take care.